Kiss My SaaS is the podcast for the modern MSP. Together with industry experts, peers, and all-star guests, we're here to tackle the realities of building a future-proof MSP cloud business with no filter. Each episode is packed with real-life stories, insights, and advice to ensure you can do more. So what are you waiting for? Let's get into it. Hey everyone, my name is Craig Weir and I'm the host of Kiss My SaaS. I just love saying that. I'm based in Toronto, Canada. I've been with Ingram Micro for about 15 years and held various roles across Canada, the US, and global. Today, we have two amazing guests, and our focus is on innovation. We'll explore trends in the channel and practical steps you can take to drive innovation in your business. First, we'll kick things off with Rahul and talk about channel trends. Then I'm excited to speak to Andrew, who's our futurist speaker, to talk about digital literacy, evolution, and practical approaches. We'll wrap things up with some music recommendations from our guests, which we'll add to our playlist. So let's get our first guest in here. Rahul, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Craig. Thanks. Happy to be here.
So Rahul, tell us a bit about yourself, your role in Ingram Micro, and some history and your connection within the MSP and ISV landscape.
Sure. I've been 7 years with Ingram Micro, various roles. My current role is I'm the product lead for both the key platforms in CloudBlue. It's Commerce, CloudBlue Commerce and CloudBlue Connect. Prior to Ingram, I've been an entrepreneur for a very long time. I had about 6 different startups, 4 completely screwed up, failed miserably. And 2, I succeeded, sold those businesses, made a little bit of money, and all of them have been around IT. 2 of them very, very early stages, so it was not cloud, it was actually hardware, PCs. I used to assemble PCs, that was the first business, and then last 4 were really around cloud tech. So that has been my so far journey, and especially around MSP. My last business before joining Ingram was being a cloud reseller. Even though I call it cloud reseller, the behavior of that company was very much like an MSP because honestly, when I started the company, I did not know that I have to brand myself as MSP. We were just good Google partners that time. So that's pretty much the very quick background of work history.
Perfect. Well, thanks, Rahul. I think that's a really good mix and blend for what we're talking about today because, 2 out of 6 for startups, that's not bad, actually, if you think of the stats. All right, so for last episode, we talked to Eric Cole, and we talked 2022 strategies. And if you haven't seen it, check out the episode before. But we asked him some questions to get to know him and get his quick thoughts before we dug deep. So let's start there. First technology you ever sold or became comfortable with?
By the time I got into third year of engineering, I decided to drop out, and that was my first business. I actually ended up setting up a computer shop, and that was the first tech which I ended up assembling and selling it to consumers back in those days in my town. So it is really the IT tech, but I've been very fascinated about those, even though I chose my education to be a mechanical engineering, but yes, it was PC, which was the first tech.
Perfect. Well, I heard you say maybe you dropped out. We'll do a quick PSA. Kids, if you're listening, stay in school. I doubt there's kids. We'll just got to say that what it is. All right. So speaking of kids, if you were to look back and maybe talk to yourself, what kind of advice would you give a younger Rahul back in the day?
A lot of lessons learned when I say 4 businesses failed, I can tell the number one advice I would give it to myself, and I give it to others as well, is do one thing at a time. When you are in that entrepreneurship mode, you think that, you can do everything in the world at the same time. I ended up running 2 businesses, and sometimes at one point in time it was 3 at the same time. Wow. It was a bad mistake, right? But learned a lot. And the reason I say one advice is do one thing at a time. If I look back, if I had just focused on one business at that point in time, I would have exploded that into a big success. But you cannot spread thin in 2 different businesses, switch gears. So that's the only one big advice I would give it to myself, and I I do the same thing to every other person I talk today who wants advice when it comes to running a business.
I think it's good advice. I think it's good advice for us today. So when you look forward, what's maybe one current technology every MSP should consider in 2022?
Well, technology to sell or to use, the question is that. I think technology to sell, we both are in cloud, so I would absolutely say, yes, be in cloud tech. That's the way to go forward, right? But yes, when it comes to MSP, I would say focus on infrastructure as a service, big money. This is where really the customers need all the help they can get, because as much as cloud is glorified in the industry that, it's online, all you need is internet connection and you can figure it out, customers get lost and they need experts' help, right? Channel and partners are always going to be there, and that's why we are in the business. We are Ingram Micro, right? So, and we are proud of that because we understand the value of that last mile person helping customers. So, for an MSP, I think staying close to infrastructure as a service is very, very key, important thing to sell. To use, there are things which I think we're going to talk about, it'll be around automation. But the most important piece, which I would say, selling cloud tech around IaaS also, make sure that MSPs have a little bit of development skills. That's the totally must skill set. It doesn't cost a lot of money other than having one or two developer type of resources in the company, but it will add so much value because today everything is all about APIs and integration.
Yep, good point. Well, thanks, Rahul. Great to have you here. Really good insight to get things started. And let's get into innovation. So as I mentioned before, today we're focusing on innovation. And for someone with your background, your experience in the ISV, MSP, and channel and platform space, I really want to pick your brain. So really, if I think about what the first question I want to ask you is, where are the major opportunities for MSPs to be innovative this year?
Yeah, I would go back to the similar point, which is innovation in terms of what they sell. So it is easy for our MSP friends to break it down, right? Innovation is a very broad word. And an innovation doesn't have to be a technology all the time. Innovation could be in the approach, in the way they treat the customers. One of the things I've learned in the last 3 years in our business is the mindset change around customer experience, right? And that is very, very important. It is innovating the way you deliver an experience. And it doesn't have to be complex. It doesn't have to be complex tech running the whole thing, right? It is all about that mindset. And once that mindset you have for all your employees, for how you treat your customers, and packaging that together to deliver that final experience, it's not just about a human talking, but it's about everything. My team actually gives a great example of Nordstorm, for example, right? What's the experience when you go to Nordstorm from start to end? What's the experience you get when you go to Apple's end to end? And technology is blended there for sure, but it's the total experience, and that is very, very innovative for me. And of course, we can talk about tech in general, right? So that's I would say one important piece, which I would say in terms of innovation, is focus on the overall experience, focus on customer service, because that's the way to go forward. Everybody's selling the same tech. Everybody's selling the same product, but the biggest differentiator is how you sell, what's the experience, and how you can retain that customer forever.
No, that's a great point. I think to your comments, I think too often we think of innovation as being this big, grandiose tech movement. Really, it's the little ingredients that can differentiate ourselves and add value to the channel. So I appreciate that.
It doesn't have to be grand, right? I've seen as simple as examples there how the overall last mile customer retention makes a huge difference, and that's Some partners have done an amazing job there, right? They just hook the customer completely into that.
Yeah, great point. And I think maybe that leads me to my next question. If you think about the size of the partner, smaller MSPs versus larger MSPs, how should a smaller, maybe scaling MSP approach innovation that would be different than a larger one?
And I would start with my personal observation, at least for the last 10, 12 years being in cloud business, especially in the cloud type of business. What I've seen is the transition from reseller to war to SI to an MSP is a typical non-cloud pattern, right? And that's a very gradual process over a period of time, which means if a company is selling, being a reseller, they try to become a value-added one and so on. But in cloud, I've seen they skip the SI type of business where they go full-on integration because they quickly realize that they don't need all the heavy lifting system integration kind of thing, and they can move from being a good focus war of cloud, which is value-added reseller, to a straight MSP because all they needed to bring in a services element and mindset there. So that's one is the business type model. How that can relate to the point which you're saying, how a small business, small MSP can bring innovation and be competitive in the market is use the advantage of being small and nimble, right? Which means you can implement all the right stuff, right? When you are big, change is very, very difficult. When you're small, you can bring change faster. You can adopt to the market quickly. You can start bringing technology experiences within the overall business to quickly make decisions. And to be giving exact specific examples, use a PSA tool, for example, right? And if you're smaller, you can implement faster. You can afford to switch to a new one if you don't like and doesn't suit your business. But that's not the case with a big one, right? If you are a big partner, you might have a big fat ERP like SAP or Oracle, and making a decision to switch the business to transform the business is a big one. It takes quarters to make a decision. It takes another couple of quarters to implement. And that's the advantage of being small and nimble. That's number one. And second, small MSPs should really focus on taking on to go to new type of customers, right? Get as many small customers you can grab because you're hungry for business. Don't go after those big logos in the beginning, because that is going to suck your entire business out, right? You get one demanding client and your entire army of 7 people or 10 people is serving that one customer as a god, right? And that's not good. So second piece of advice would be, whatever you're doing, just do it with a full focus, fail fast, and go after small to medium type of customers to serve them, give them the best experience. That would be the best way to grow. And once you have a critical mass revenue, then invest to go after the big logos.
Oh, great advice. And I think you touched on it earlier, saying focus. So as we kind of wrap things up, if we look at what we've seen in the channel, what we're seeing in this space, what are some of the more impactful changes and innovation and approaches that you've seen in this space this year?
Changes, I think one of the constant big change I'm seeing is the ability to bring that services mindset and offering this whole thing as a package. And these are some good MSPs do very well in our industry right now. Not a lot of people get it, but the ones who really get it, they have successfully managed to package the whole thing and then deliver this as a single offer to their customers, number one. And the second big focus which I'm seeing is how partners are now trying to look at using the right tech to run their business, right? Because MSPs, one, there is an MSP traditional legacy of providing general services, but now today's new definition of MSP is blending it with security and cloud combined, and that requires a little bit of automation in place. I don't want to sound like a salesperson, but yes, please use PSA there. It is a must to grow your MSP business. There are a lot of them out there, about 6, 7 good popular names. And our own platform, which we recently acquired in 2020, is absolutely in the race. It's one of the best, and we are adding a lot of features, functionality. Why PSA? PSA makes a lot of sense. It is designed. It is an ERP built for MSPs. It knows your business, or even if you don't know the business, by deploying a PSA platform for yourself, you will get there easily because it is made for that. So PSA is a good stepping stone, and that's where I was talking about making decisions to replace other system. It's a good decision. If you are a focused MSP, you want to get there into a MSP business as a choice, then don't avoid PSA.
Perfect. Great advice, Rahul. I really appreciate it. It was great chatting with you. Get your perspective on the channel and innovation. And we'll jump into our next segment.
Innovation, innovation, innovation. That word appears everywhere, even in the title of this podcast. But why? Because innovation in business today is critical. Innovating increases your competitiveness either by improving your pricing and margins or by offering new products and experiences. For smaller MSPs, it could be exploring new opportunities or services. Innovation isn't all AI, metaverses, and digital twins. It's about forward momentum and staying receptive. What does it mean to you? And you have to ask yourself, if you're not innovating, are you stagnating? Let's get back to that chat.
We just spoke to Rahul and talked about trends and the foundations and opportunities for innovation in the channel, but we're not talking about theory in this podcast. It needs to be practical. So I've invited Andrew Grill, a futurist speaker, a technology trends expert, strategic board level advisor, and also a podcast host. I had to cheat on my notes because there's so many titles in that. Andrew, I'm super excited to have you on the show, but before we get into it, futurist is probably one of the coolest titles I've heard in quite a while. So tell us what this means, what innovation means to you, and a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, hi Craig. Thanks for having me on the show. When we hear the word futurist, we think of Nostradamus, Nikola Tesla, or even Arthur C. Clarke. Arthur C. Clarke famously teamed up with Stanley Kubrick to produce the 2001 Space Odyssey movie in the late 1960s. And I came across a really interesting interview with Arthur in 1974. It was from an Australian journalist. And he said, look, you've just developed this movie called 2001. So what will life be like in the year 2001? And in 3 minutes, Arthur essentially describes the internet. He said, we will not have to be fixed into offices. We can work away. We can travel. The thing is, though, that Arthur was looking at things that are 30 years in the distance. Now, I'm sure many people listening today haven't got 30 years, may not even have 30 months or 30 weeks. They need to know right now, today, tomorrow, next week, what do I need to do to improve my business? So I call myself the Actionable Futurist, and hopefully by the end of the discussion today, I'll give you 5 actionable things that you can do today. In terms of the question about innovation, how do you innovate inside a moving business? I think innovation is about finding the time, the team, and the focus to do something new without letting your existing business implode. But also the most profitable, highest value MSPs, I think, will actually own some of their own intellectual property. So that's something you need to think about as well. In terms of my own background, I grew up in a small business family, so I ultimately know what it's like to have those highs and lows of working for a small or medium company. I'm a technologist. I have a couple of engineering degrees. I started my career in Australia with British Aerospace, working on satellite Earth station projects for the Australian Army. Some real innovation needed there as well. I worked for big telcos like Telstra and Optus in Australia, actually launched the first ATM and frame relay network, and we never talk about frame relay and ATM anymore. I've also run 6 startups over a 12-year period. Every one of those was about innovation, starting from scratch, taking new concepts to market. And more recently, I was a managing partner at IBM looking at a collaboration practice globally. So hopefully I'm somewhat qualified, but thrilled to be here to talk about innovation.
No, fantastic. Welcome to the show. And I heard a couple, maybe 3 Australian references. Let's see if we can get a couple more Aussie in there. So this podcast is all about the reality and the impact of digital transformation in the channel. Andrew, you and I have talked before, and you have some really cool views on how to tackle this in an actionable way. Specifically, you've referenced before two types of tribes, going digital and born digital. Can you explain what this means to our listeners?
Yeah, the thing is, in every organization, we have these two tribes. Let me explain who they are. So the going digital. Many of you might be represented on the show today. You are incredibly senior and experienced. You've been doing this for a while. You can get business proposals through. You can win new business. But your digital skills are still developing. The born digital, their first toy was an iPhone. They live and breathe digital. The thing is, the two tribes need each other. The going digital need to hear the views of the born digital, and the born digital want their views heard. And a practical, actionable way to make this happen is to run a hackathon. Now, I'm sure many people have either heard of hackathons or run them, but what about running a hackathon to solve key business challenges? And the best way to do this is actually get the born digital to set it up. First of all, they're going to say, hallelujah, finally senior management is listening to our crazy ideas. The senior leaders, the going digital, will actually have a chance to hear how other generations think. And you will be surprised to see how many things you can solve in an afternoon or a day running a hackathon. So nurture these two tribes, understand that they're different, but they actually will drive innovation. And I've seen this happen in real life where the two tribes come together and the more experienced people go, wow, we never thought that way. This has been really, really useful. So leverage those two tribes and embrace them.
Okay, without sharing our ages, Andrew, are we going digital or born digital? What do you think?
I'm hybrid. I'm a geek that's going digital that feels like I was born digital.
All right, I love it. I'll keep it at that one. We'll keep it safe. In part of your answer, what I took out of that was a bit of culture, was the dynamic of how these mix together. I'm a big proponent of culture eats strategy for breakfast every single day. What type of culture, when you think of this merge, is required for this journey or this transformation of digital?
So it's not just the right culture, you've got to have the right mindset. And as I said in my intro, you've got to have the time to innovate, to be able to sometimes stop and look at what's happening out there, what the new innovations are, what our clients are telling us. And I talk about another thing. I like using these phrases because you can then use them. I talk about being digitally curious. And in fact, I've had the opportunity to speak to a number of Ingram Micro audiences. And about 2-3 weeks ago, I was speaking with the cyber and cloud team for their sales kickoff. I literally walked out on stage. I stopped and I said, are you digitally curious? And everyone looked at each other and went, what is this crazy Australian, another reference, talking about? I got them all to stand up. And I asked them 6 simple questions. I said, if you're doing what I'm doing, stay standing. I said, are you on LinkedIn? Have you Googled yourself lately? Do you consume all your newspapers and magazines digitally? Do you bank with an app-only bank? Do you secure all of your channels with two-factor authentication? And have you bought some Bitcoin? And what was really interesting is people were standing up and sitting down. And I was actually pleasantly surprised. My Ingram Micro Cloud audiences were quite digitally curious. But when I asked them those 6 questions, I said, sit back and think, the things that you're not doing, why aren't you doing that? Not suggesting for a moment you go and buy thousands of dollars worth of Bitcoin, but I bought some Bitcoin at its peak in 2017. Why? I was digitally curious. What were all these people talking about? Was this a replacement for traditional currency? And when I bought my Bitcoin, I found that I was checking the app every 5 minutes. It was addictive. It's going up, it's going down. But when I tried to convert that actually 20 pounds worth of Bitcoin back into pounds, it took me 4 weeks and 2 banks. So by being digitally curious, it told me this is not ready for prime time. I need to be aware of this. So that simple exercise, ask yourself those 6 questions. And if any of those you're not doing, ask yourself why.
Yeah, that's a great response. And it makes you think, it makes you reflect, and maybe the education, the awareness, the knowledge becomes really important. And maybe I'll rephrase it as this kind of in the scope of digital literacy. And when you think about becoming digital and that digital literacy knowledge, can you elaborate on this of where listeners can better understand and how they take that perspective, that frame of mind into their own company?
Another exercise I do during my talks is I put up a slide that's full of jargon. I call it the scary slide because there are some things on there. Actually looking at one I presented recently. I've got predictive analytics, sovereign identity, NFT, RFID. And some of those phrases, people sitting in the audience are going to say, yeah, I know all about that. But others, they won't. And I deliberately put some hard ones and some easy ones. And again, literacy is about not being an absolute scholar on every one of those things, but understanding what they mean. So a few years ago, not many people knew what distributed ledger technology was, or blockchain, or even Bitcoin. But now, as they become more curious, they actually literally go to Wikipedia. What does it mean? And what does it mean for my organization? So I think you need to have a level of digital literacy across every organization. If you're a school-age student, you are taught how money works, because when you leave school and go into the big bad world, you need to be able to fend for yourself and work out how money works and why you need to save and all those sort of things. I've had a number of guests on my podcast that have said digital and AI literacy is as important as financial literacy. I was working with an engineering firm called Fraser Nash here in the UK. They've decided to go and reskill 500 of their staff. They've gone and teamed with some local institutions to give them some digital literacy courses to bring everyone up so there is an understanding of what these terms mean. Because if you're going to be innovative in an MSP, if you're going to be one step ahead of your client, you need to understand what's happening next. So when they say, I read about this thing called NFTs, what are they? You can say, well, actually, I know a bit about them. I know whether they're relevant for your business. I know whether you're going to have to adopt cryptocurrency as a payment method and what that means for you. So it's really bringing the level of understanding of digital technologies and terms to that same level across the organization. And it's really easy to do. And people will be more able to have conversations with themselves internally and, more importantly, appear more connected and intelligent when they're talking to clients.
Okay. So if you were saying it's easy to do, which a lot of people would scratch their head and be like, I disagree, and or innovation is such a large subject and topic, maybe a couple examples of in the channel, some partners and some businesses that actually implemented something that was innovative and actually really worked. It took off. It was successful.
There are so many different innovation examples, so I'll just run through a few. And a lot of them are connected to what's happened over the last few years. We've had to innovate because things stopped being the same. There's a company called MicroShare that is an IoT as a service provider, and I've spoken to their CEO, Ron Rock. They had to massively pivot their business when the lockdowns happened because their main business was about having IoT sensors in commercial office spaces. No one was going into commercial office spaces. So they pivoted to say, if we can measure CO2 levels, occupancy levels, we can actually help assist a safe return to work. This week I had the opportunity to speak to Christina Kosmowski, who's the CEO of Logic Monitor. They provide logic monitoring and awareness for all sorts of platforms. Many people in the channels might use them as well. And I asked her this question, how do you innovate? And she said, we do it by listening to customers. Our customers have asked us to do more things, be more innovative, have better ways of doing things, have less friction. And so they are in the channel, they're listening to their customers. Air IT, they've won an award. They had a whole lot of solutions to remote work. They had a Teams Talk product. Darktrace do self-learning AI, understanding what normal behavior is in cybersecurity. And Transputech looked at a Thermavis thermal scanner, again, helping return to work. So those different opportunities there, those different innovations were because they said, we need to do something different. We need to understand how our customers can work more efficiently, and we need to be on that front foot. And in each of those cases, it wasn't rocket science. It wasn't going back to learning how to innovate. It was just looking at what they have and thinking in a very different way.
Hey, Andrew, that's a great point. I was actually watching a video the other day about Simon Sinek, and you called something out I want to really touch on. You said, listen to your customer. Because a lot of people think of innovation as a completely recreation of the wheel, a complete transformation. Instead of just listening and go, what's the problem I'm trying to solve? How can I deliver more value to my customer? And I think that's where innovation really comes from.
In fact, there's one easy way to actually evoke innovation there. A lot of people will be using collaboration tools like Slack or Teams. Both of those can be enabled to allow you to actually have your customers on a Slack or a Teams channel. And you can set it up, and there are easy ways to do this, turning on public mode and those sort of things. So imagine having a Slack or Teams channel where you can ask me anything, and the customer goes, I'm just stuck on this. I'm going to ask my MSP because they have all the answers. You then leverage the whole of your organization. When I was an IBM, I used to say to customers, I can bring to you the strength of 400,000 people. Now, they're a huge organization, but I knew that if a customer had a problem, I could use my internal network to get the answer. So why not extend your internal communication collaboration platform to your clients to solve those problems? And then they are going to have you literally on speed dial. And when they say, we've got this crazy idea, you get the first attack at that problem.
No, it's a great point. Keeping it simple and really focusing on customers' needs. So we started this discussion around being practical, and we talked about being a futurist. And I think there's a lot of skeptics. Let's really kind of shut the skeptics down if there's any that are listening. they're probably thinking, to your point, we're talking 5-10 years down the road, and we've tried to really focus it. I know it's practical today. We're not talking theoretical. We're talking practical application. So let's talk about that right now. Can you give me 3, 4, heck, I'll challenge you 5 examples of what can a partner do today, this week, to start driving innovation into their own business?
Yeah, I always leave people with 5 things they can be doing, a sort of a to-do list. First of all is be more digitally curious.
Hang on a minute. Did we say digitally curious? That's right. Digitally curious is the idea that, as Andrew Grill has repeated for 30 years, to get digital, you need to be digital. It means you should personally try out new platforms and apps to really see what they can do for you, and in turn, what they can do for your customers and your business. So, start using and living with new technology. Download the upgrades, pay with Bitcoin, enter the metaverse, listen to podcasts about MSPs. Be more digitally curious. Let's get back to that chat.
Think back to those 6 things or those bits of jargon that I mentioned. Do you know what they mean? Are you doing them? Can you be more curious? Do you have IoT devices at home? Have you bought some cryptocurrency? Are you playing with this tech to see how it works and make it real? So experiment. Number 2, experiment with this new technology at home. I have a bunch of lights that are controlled. The lights that are shining on me right now are all Wi-Fi enabled. I've played with this new technology to see what the art of the possible is and to try and break it. Leverage those 2 tribes. Seek out the differences in your 2 tribes. And number 4, run a hackathon. Get the Born Digital to run it. They will be so excited that they've had the opportunity to do that. It'll also be an acquisition tool because they will say to their mates, hey, our company is running a hackathon. You should come and join us. And the final thing to be really, really proactive and actionable is plan the time to think about these things and leverage your customer ideas. Once a week, have a stand-up where you actually say, we're not talking about business issues, we're talking about what's next.
No, that's great. And if you don't mind, I want to maybe double click on 2 of those. When we think of hackathon, we think of typically hackers, white hats going into an environment. But to your point, it's really hacking a problem, hacking an issue. And then the second thing I really want to maybe spend a little more time on is planning for this is in part of your business. This is not just a one and done thing. This becomes a regular engagement. So maybe from a hackathon perspective and that part of regular culture to really talk about it, maybe you can elaborate a little bit further.
Yeah, so the hackathon idea is not new, and you're right, that when people hear the word hack, they think we're going to get hacked. I gave this example to a bank and they said, you can't mention that, it sounds bad. I said, no, it's hacking ideas. So again, you need to set aside the time. And what'll happen though, you'll do it once and you'll say, this was actually a really good idea. We should do it every month or every quarter because it just brings these new ideas forward that we didn't think about. And as I said, you get the young people to actually put it together. Is it going to be virtual? Are you going to bring people into the office? Are you going to have it on a collaboration platform? But think of 3 key business challenges you're trying to solve. Okay, we want to increase revenue. We want to retain these 3 customers. What can we do? And you'll really find that this is when innovation takes off because that's all you're thinking about. You're not thinking about, closing the quarter. You're not thinking about whether the new logo is any good. You're thinking about how to solve these problems and you'll focus and zero in on those. And I think they're really, really important.
No, it's fantastic. I always try to take away one thing and I'm taking away the hackathon because we would typically refer in the corporate world as a tiger team or a task force. And it's typically, it gets a little cumbersome, a little big, a little long, and you feel like you never really accomplish what you want. But it's the mindset, to your point. If I take a hackathon approach, I think that'll completely change how we approach things. So thank you for that one. Listen, Andrew, I think you nailed it. I think you nailed it across the board, across everything we do. And so I want to jump into our next segment, which is talks about some music. Gentlemen, I want to thank you for your time today. And let's finish with some fun. We always like to end our session with some music. So we look at 2 songs, one on your repeat playlist and one maybe something a little more different. Rahul, let's begin with you. What songs do you want to add? Maybe a favorite one on replay that you can't get enough of, and maybe a second one that's a guilty pleasure you listen to in the car or the shower, but maybe you don't want your friends to know about. What are your thoughts?
Guilty pleasure, it's called Fade to Black from Metallica, one of my best songs so far. And that's part of my rock music collections. So that is one, and let me look at the second one, which I keep listening to. By the way, the part funny part about my music taste is I totally ignore the lyrics. That's why I don't even remember I just enjoy the music. So
I'm actually with you, buddy. My wife makes fun of me all the time.
No, there is a benefit of it. I because of that, that way of I enjoy the music only, I can listen to any songs, right? It can be any language. I enjoy that. So, Cold Heart. This has been on my list because of my kids from Elton John. Yeah, this is my to-go song, which I think keeps playing all over the place also.
Now over to you, Andrew. What are 2 picks that you can add to our playlist? One that you have on replay, but I'm going to challenge you. One maybe you're quietly enjoying, maybe in the car, in the shower, that you don't want people to know about. What do you have for us?
So the one on repeat, I went to the data. I love data. I live and breathe data. So every Spotify track that I listen to gets scrobbled, they call it, to Last FM. So I went to my Last FM playlist, and it was very easy to see what the number 1 always on repeat song was. It's Paul Woolford and Karen Harding with a song called You Already Know. It's a high energy, fast tempo song. It's great for walking, and it's one that I obviously played a lot because I wanted to think out an idea or respond to something. And so the data told me that was my number 1 song. The second one is actually not one that I'm embarrassed about. It's one that probably you've never heard of, from an artist called Joe Jackson. He's an English singer-songwriter. The song's called You Can't Get What You Want Till You Know What You Want. It's from an album from 1994 called Body and Soul. Interestingly, this is one of the first tracks that he recorded completely digitally, straight to digital tape. He recorded in Manhattan's Masonic Hall. It sounds fantastic. It's a soppy love song, but it just sounds amazing, and it was actually a hit for him in America, I think. So that's my on repeat and my secret song.
I like it. So the UK influence, the American influence for the Aussie. So I was expecting maybe an Aussie song, but we'll go for next time. So to both of you, I want to thank you for your selections. We'll continue to build the playlist over the course of the season, and you can find the link in the description. I want to thank my guests today, Rahul and Andrew, both who I respect, are full of knowledge and expertise in the channel. I want to thank our listeners, you, because we're trying to shake things up. We want to bring you along in that journey. And finally, I hope you can join us next time on Kiss My SaaS, a podcast for the modern MSP. Make sure you subscribe to the show to get the next update available on your podcast platform, and make sure you leave a comment and review. Until next time. Thanks for listening to this episode of Kiss My SaaS, the podcast for the modern MSP. From the smartest solvers to the most inspiring innovators, we're here to help MSPs rise with more innovation, more opportunity, and more success. So stay awesome, and we'll catch you next time. The information, opinions, and recommendations presented in this podcast are for general information only, representing the views of the host and our guests, not the broader view of Ingram Micro Cloud. Information from this podcast should not be referenced in any way to imply such approval or endorsement. Thank you.